English Short Stories, The Silence of the Pines. Arthur arrived at the secluded cabin during a torrential downpour, lugging a heavy typewriter that felt like a tombstone for his defunct career. For 12 agonizing months, the novelist had stared at blank pages, his imagination as dry as a desert bone. He had traded his bustling city apartment for this rustic wooden sanctuary, convinced that the profound silence of the ancient pines would finally coax the dormant stories out of his tired mind. He spent his first few days simply listening to the wind, hoping for a spark. However, the isolation initially felt more like a prison than a retreat. Each morning, Arthur would sit by the dusty window, watching the mist roll over the jagged peaks, yet the words remained elusive. He tried to establish a strict routine, brewing pots of bitter coffee and forcing himself to sit at the desk for 8 hours straight. The cabin was filled with the scents of old cedar and rain, but his notebooks remained tragically empty, mocking his desperate attempts to reconnect with his creative spirit. Just as he was on the verge of packing his bags and surrendering to defeat, a sudden late-night thunderstorm knocked out the power. In the flickering glow of a solitary candle, the shadows on the walls began to dance in peculiar, rhythmic patterns. Arthur watched as the light caught the rough texture of the wood grain, and suddenly he saw a face, then a landscape. The sensory deprivation of the woods had finally forced his brain to invent its own entertainment. He reached for his pen, and for the first time in a year, the ink flowed without hesitation. By the time the sun climbed over the horizon, Arthur had filled 20 pages with a frantic, sprawling prose. He realized that he hadn't needed a grand adventure or a change of scenery as much as he had needed to be bored enough to dream again. The dry spell had finally broken, washed away by the quiet intensity of the forest. As he stepped out onto the porch to breathe in the crisp morning air, he knew that the cabin had served its purpose. It hadn't given him a story, but it had given him back his voice.